Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, welcome everybody out there in podcast land / YouTube world. All right, as you know, this is, of course, the Bunny Rabbit's Hole, and I am Jason with my co-host.
I am Craig.
Yes, and here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole, if this is your first time here, what we do each week is we take a central theme, we explore, we talk about, and when something inspires us to talk about something completely different, we go down that little bunny rabbit's hole until we come to the end or until Craig finally gets tired of me just rambling on about bullshit and he brings us back to the main topic.
Right. And as Jason said, we pick a central topic. We spend usually about a week researching it, and we research both sides of the topic, not just what fits our narrative. But we also include our opinion, and this is for entertainment. And if you're easily offended, we don't fucking care. Go away.
That was, you were warned, so bye-bye. And there's really nothing in this episode that's going to be deemed offensive, so you can stick around a little bit longer if you want and just see how you like it. But anyway, so without further ado, let's just jump in. What is our topic today?
Our topic today is what I believe to be, and I could be wrong about this because I didn't research it deep enough to find out, but I believe it was the very first miniseries that combined all these heroes from the Marvel Universe and all the villains from the Marvel Universe into a 12-issue miniseries called The Secret Wars that came out in 1984.
Yes.
There may have, I believe there was some that actually came out earlier, now that I think about it.
Okay. But this was the big one. And the reason that we pulled this one out is because I do believe that some form of this will be the end of the next phase of the MCU, with Disney buying up the rights to the X-Men and to Fantastic Four and
the world.
Yeah. So what I do believe that this is the end game to end game.
Okay.
That the Secret Wars is where they want to go, because without buying up the rights to all that stuff, you can't create this. And by the time we're done here, you're going to see how, if done right, how fucking cool this story would be. Because it's got hands down the greatest villain that kind of leads the villains in this thing in Doctor Who. But before we get into that, let's kind of give a little bit more about what the Secret Wars were.
Well, this is a series that was written by Jim Shooter, who was at the time a big name in comic books. And every episode except for 2 were drawn by Michael Zeck. The other 2 were drawn by Bob Layton. And he drew issues number 4 and 5. And what I really like about this is you can't tell. You can't tell there was a different artist that stepped in for 2 episodes.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't have known that there was 2 different artists.
Yeah, because the art style, everything stayed the same. Mind you, back then, we didn't have digital art, so everything was done by hand. Everything was colored by hand, and you can see, I found spots in there where the marker they used for the color of Volcano's slingy or onesie thing, kind of the red kind of leached into her chest. So, back then they were on such a time crunch to get stuff out, and they worked on so many different issues at a time that they had to work as fast as they could.
Right. And
so quality suffered a little bit.
But, and what I really enjoyed back, like with some of these, is they may have taken some shortcuts in the art, but the stories were really good.
Stories were really good. I'm going to say a couple things that I didn't like about the comics first before we get into it, because again, we do both sides. I love this series, but what irritated the piss out of me was constantly hearing them talk about what their powers were. Granted, if you've never seen these heroes before, this is your first time sitting down reading them, yeah, you kind of need to know that stuff, so they have to put it in there. But man, it just irritated the piss out of me. And yes, I know in the first 2 issues alone, they referred to Hulk having Bruce Banner's brain.
Right. And
three times in 2 issues.
Yeah, it was the first time that Hulk actually had the intelligence of Bruce Banner. So they're basically meshed into one, which I think you will start seeing going forward in the MCU after Thor Ragnarok. You kind of seen Hulk speak,
Right.
more on like it was a childish level, but he spoke to Thor as,
Right. It was less guttural, a little bit more intelligible.
Yes, and I do believe that the mesh between, and the reason that you in Infinity War you didn't really see the Hulk. I think that the only way that the two are going to coexist is if they become the same.
Right.
They cohabitate the space, if you will.
Right.
And so it was the first time that, but I did find that annoying too, that they kept repeating. It's like, well, Hulk's smart now. Well, just say that once and we got it.
Right. But so, okay, I guess we'll start out. So the whole premise of this story
Well,
is
I'm going to throw my gripe out real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so my biggest gripe was the superheroes that they have at the time. I mean, you have all the heavy hitters. You have Cap, you have Wolverine, you have Spider-Man, you have the Hulk, you have Iron Man, you have the Human Torch, Cyclops, Colossus. You have all of the heavy hitters from there. You have all the X-Men, all the Avengers, plus Nightcrawler.
Fantastic Four.
Yeah, you had plus all the Fantastic Four. The villains didn't have that same A-list roster.
No, they did not. Not to mention, the villains were outnumbered by the good guys.
Yes. I mean, to the point where we'll go into this later, they had to create 2 more.
Right. Hey, I forgot a note, so keep talking. I'm going to go grab it real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. So the villains that they had in there, one in particular that really drove me nuts was Kang the Conqueror. Now, there's speculation that when they go into the next phase of the MCU, Kang will be the new Thanos going forward. But Kang, in this particular instance, is a pussy.
Yeah.
He gets beaten up, and if he's going to be the new Thanos going forward, there's speculation that he is. I don't see it. I don't see how that's going to be especially when he gets beaten up over. And why the fuck who is the Wrecking Crew?
Oh, you never heard of the Wrecking Crew?
I know, I knew the Wrecking Crew, but it's like
they're B-list players.
Yeah, they're not. We'll go into the people that we'd rather see in here later going forward, but there's a bunch of them. But that there's a lot better villains that could have been in here, and I think it would have played stronger.
I do have a list of everybody who was featured in it.
Okay.
So that's why I had to run up and get, because I forgot it. The hero side, you have the entire Fantastic Four minus the Invisible Woman because she was pregnant, which we heard about constantly throughout the goddamn series.
Yes.
So you had Human Torch, you had the Thing, and you had Mr. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Then you had the Avengers at the time who were led at the time by Wasp, but she deferred to Captain America. So you've got Iron Man, She-Hulk, Hulk, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, Thor, and Wasp. Those were all the Avengers that were there. Then you had the X-Men, which was Professor X, who could all of a sudden walk, Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. Then your side characters who weren't involved in groups was Magneto, Spider-Man, and a brand new Spider-Woman who was introduced in this series. Now, on the villain side, you have Kang, who you talked about. You have the Observer Man. You have Dr. Octopus, who they really did not utilize well.
No.
Dr. Doom, Molecule Man, who is arguably probably the most powerful villain next to Galactus.
Yeah.
Ultron, the Lizard, who we'll get into that. Then you have the Wrecking Crew, like you talked, which consists of Bulldozer, Wrecker, Piledriver, Thunderball. You have Enchantress, who is an Asgardian like Thor. You have Galactus. Then there's the two they created, Volcana and Titania, and then later on, Claw, who's made of sound, appeared out of Galactus' ship, which we'll get into later. But that's the entire list of heroes and villains that were involved in this.
So I found a couple things about the Secret Wars that I kind of wanted to do. That this whole premise, and this is maybe why that the villains were kind of rushed. The whole premise and even the name, the Secret Wars, wasn't Marvel's idea. They were kind of forced. They were kind of forced into it by the toy makers.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because at the same time, Kenner was making DC toys, and they were flying off the shelves. So they was it Hasbro? No, Mattel. It was Mattel that wanted to start a line of Marvel heroes to try to, maintain the same popularity that the DC heroes were getting at the same time. So tying in with the Secret Wars, they wanted to up their toy game, and they were kind of like, well, we need something big to draw from. So they were kind of at Mattel's mercy,
right
at some of this. So some of this wasn't even their idea,
right. And this, like I said, this series came out in 1984, so this was the peak of our childhood, right as we're getting ready to traverse into our teen years, when we were in our glory of comic book days, when we were always reading comic books at that time.
Exactly.
But so the premise of the entire thing, the entire storyline, is there's a being called the Beyonder, and apparently he's bored, can't find God porn to watch or whatever.
Right.
So he decides he's going to create a battle world. So he takes chunks from all these different planets, including Earth, and then grabs all these heroes and all these villains and puts them in these two ships, and they all just materialize in there, and then they all watch as all these pieces of these planets merge and form a planet, and there's a slit in space with some light coming out of it, and Beyonder saying, basically kill your enemies and you can have your heart's desire. So you have all the heroes on their ship, and then they realize Magneto's with them, and at that time Magneto was one of the biggest bad guys in the Marvel Universe, so that part still confuses me.
Well, that was their attempt to try to say that most of Magneto's his thing was really it wasn't that he was a bad guy. He was just so pro mutant that he was anti Homo sapien. He was just all about advancing his race.
He was like Malcolm X of the mutants.
Yeah, but he used a lot of violence in his campaign.
Right.
So I think they tried to explain it away as the Beyonder didn't understand the internal conflict within him, because he believed what he was doing was right. So everything that he was doing was for the
for the sake of mutant kind.
Yeah, it was. He had altruism at heart. All this. So I think that's how Marvel wanted to kind of like branch out and make the character bigger.
Right. I also believe that I think Stan Lee was beyond it, because granted, this is all after the Civil Rights Movement, but he kind of created his own Civil Rights Movement in comic books with mutants and non-mutants.
Yes.
And there's a lot. I mean, I've got notes on this as we go through the series where I'm going to point out some of these things.
But it didn't change the fact that the heroes don't know the internal ticking of Magneto. They only seen the harm, and they've only, the ones that only fought him didn't understand why he was there. Nobody did.
Yeah, the only one that was really nonplussed about him being there was Professor X. He was like, oh, cool, got an ally. Whatever.
Yeah, cool. Eric's here.
Yep. So then you have on the villain ship, basically Doom controls everything. Everybody's got to bow to Doom.
Yeah.
And I believe it. Like once they landed and stuff, he pretty much got control of Ultron and wiped out everybody.
Yeah.
So they would bow to him.
So let's just put that in perspective. Ultron was the bad guy in the second Avengers movie. It took all the Avengers just to beat Ultron.
Mm-hmm.
Doom goes, do my bidding, and makes, powers up Ultron, reprograms him, and next thing you know, he's taking out the villains, and they had no chance.
Right. Well, in what we got to say, what led up to that? What led up to that was Ultron. It was a being of supreme power and supreme arrogance, and saw Galactus and went up to try to, beat or destroy Galactus, and Galactus basically pulled a Thanos, snapped and pulled the power out of him, and he drops. And then Doom repowered him and reprogrammed him.
Yes. Yeah, I did jump ahead a bit.
Oh, that's okay. I was too, so that's all right.
But yeah, so looming in all this, you have the good guys, you have the bad guys, but then you have this, like you said, it's this rip in the thing. If you've ever seen the Futurama cartoon, Beast of a Million Backs, it's that same rip in space and time that's up there in the thing, and that's the Beyonder. And sitting right below it is Galactus.
Right.
Now, what we know about Galactus is he has a insatiable hunger for power, meaning that he needs to eat it, and how he does that is he devours worlds.
Right.
And he is setting his sight on devouring Battleworld.
Right. Well, and when they start out and they're still on the ships, after he snuffs out Ultron, he decides that he wants to confront Beyonder, so he flies off and Doom follows him. They go up to the slit, and basically, with just a whim, the Beyonder knocks Doom and Galactus out.
So at this point is when in the Marvel MCU, I don't even know what they refer to this universe as at this point, but in the Marvel universe, the introduction of the Beyonder is the most powerful character in the Marvel universe at this point. Later on, you'll find out that the Living Tribunal and the One Above All, and I think 2 or 3 others, are actually more powerful than the Beyonder, and the Beyonder is actually part of a race of other Beyonders.
Right. Right.
You'll find all this out later, but this is the first introduction of this character, and he is unquestioned the most powerful being in the universe at any time. I think it's kind of weird because at the same time, Susan Storm, Invisible Girl, is actually pregnant with a being that's going to be almost as equal power in Franklin Richards. Her son, Franklin Richards, turns out to be an Omega level mutant that has almost the same amount of power as the Beyonder.
Right. And that's like future episodes. We don't.
That's way in the future. Yeah. That's just kind of backstory. We're just kind of getting everybody's blood flowing. But yes, so Doom follows Galactus towards the thing, and as we know how powerful Galactus is, Galactus is no match for him. So Doom obviously is no match for the Beyonder either, and they come crashing back.
Right. So at that point, they put them all. Beyonder puts them all on the Battleworld, and that's when it gets heated between Magneto and the rest of the heroes. But the X-Men are siding with Magneto, and Captain Marvel, who is an African-American woman who has these powers, and this is kind of a precursor of what's going to happen later, which kind of irritated me. But Cyclops is standing up for Magneto. She says, "Stuff it, boy. Your optic blasts are zipped to a lady whose whole body transforms into energy."
Yeah. So
the dialogue in this, now going back reading it some 30-some years later, is horrible. It's horrible. And they could not write for African-American people. They made them all sound like Shaft.
Right. This was still the getting over the era of blaxploitation.
Right, right. So they all go their separate ways. That's when when they find these bunkers that they go to. They have like 450 some levels to them.
Yeah. And like the one that the Avengers eventually go into, they find out that it's the size of Chicago.
Right,
the
right.
base, just the base.
Yeah. And then when the bad guys go to theirs, that's when Doom powers up Ultron and gets everybody under his control.
Yeah. And they should have just went, okay, Doom, you're in charge to begin with, because, I mean, frankly, Dr. Doom is one of the coolest villains ever.
Well, not to mention, probably the most intelligent
villain
ever. He is the epitome of mad scientist.
Yeah, forget about that bullshit that you saw in the Fantastic Four movies, because that wasn't Dr. Doom. Right. Dr. Doom, and here's why Dr. Doom's character is so, I mean, he's a brilliant, Victor Von Doom is his name. He was a brilliant, brilliant scientist, on level with Reed Richards in intelligence, maybe even smarter. But his goal, his drive, his push is to figure out how to free his mother from hell. And I mean, that's just the coolest backstory. I mean,
right.
You will do anything, destroy anyone, ruin anyone, destroy everything in your path to get your mother out of hell.
Right.
That's just the coolest backstory.
And actually, before Doom goes to the base, because when Doom and Galactus got knocked out, they got knocked down to the planet. And I really like this scene because they do it through several panels where Galactus awakens, and instead of like crawling over to get up as most people do, he just levitates his body upright and then starts walking off. And that's when Doom realizes that the power that Galactus actually has.
Yes. Yes. And I want to show something. I'm kind of following along. I actually have the whole series of
I left mine upstairs.
As do you. But those that are watching on YouTube, you can kind of see here. Here's kind of foreshadowing. It is the writing team, the artist team with Mickey Mouse. And this is in '84. This is long before Disney bought Marvel. But that's kind of foreshadowing. This is in the comic. I thought it was kind of funny.
Right. But there was several story tools that were utilized also in making this that I really, really enjoyed. Now, I believe it's in the second issue where there's this huge storm going on, a deadly storm. It's the one where Thor's out there smiling and there's a rock coming at their base and he uses his hammer to destroy it. And he's just having a fucking blast. Well, mind you, in the first issue, Magneto had enough. He's leaving, blah, blah, blah. And he traps the Wasp in this metal shit, like a metal jail, basically. He takes her with him.
It's like a whole bunch of like scrap metal, kind of what happens to Thor at the beginning of Infinity War when the Cullen Mull wraps him up in metal and he's kind of trapped there and he can't move. Magneto kind of does the same thing to the Wasp.
Right. So they take off and they go, and he finds his own bunker because they're just readily available
There's a plethora of bunkers on the battle world, apparently.
Right. And it's another huge one. And they utilize the storm to force Wasp to develop a relationship with Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where they almost kiss and then the X-Men show up.
Yes.
Because nobody's a bigger cock blocker than the X-Men.
Nobody's bigger than Hawkeye and Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is going to right in between while all this is happening with Wasp and Magneto and the storm and Thor crashing, that is arguably the dumbest mode of transportation I've ever seen in Marvel Comics outside of Dazzler, because it's on par with Dazzler, but this is even dumber because it happens with Iron Man. Iron Man is flying is going with Captain Marvel. Now, this isn't the Captain Marvel that you see in the movies today. It's not the Brie Larson Captain Marvel. This is an earlier incarnation. Like you said, it's an African American woman. I forgot what her actual name was.
Yeah, I don't remember it either.
But I have the Marvel Universe over there. I should go look at it, but I won't. But she's flying because she can turn into actual light and travel at the speed of light. He's Iron Man. We know he can fly. Instead, like having some kind of weird fucked up version of a Heelys in his boots, he decides to go on roller skates. I'm showing the YouTube people here so you can actually see it. She's flying in the background and he is not rollerblading even, just roller skating next to her.
Well, rollerblades weren't invented then. Rollerblades hadn't been invented. Yeah, I found that, and the dialogue between those two, it was so, it really kind of showed the misogyny of the writers at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they talked down to the women. They, he kept calling her babe and shit like that.
Right, yeah. Because here's one thing. She says, "Come on, slowpoke," and he says, "No way, babe. My armor's built-in jet skates can keep up with your light form even at your lowest speed." Huh?
Right.
Let's see. The reason we can't go faster than light is because of mass. If you have any kind of mass, you cannot go faster than light. Wheels have mass, plus they create friction. Friction slows you down. Even at her slowest speed, she's still going 802,000 miles per second. You can't roller skate that fast. I'm sorry.
Oh, and why he has roller skates when he can fucking fly just is baffling.
Why ground yourself to the terrain when no, I'm sorry, the propulsion system that you have, even if you have the nanobot armor that he has in Infinity War, you're still not going to do the speed of light.
Right. But one thing about this series that I really liked is how much of a badass they made Spider-Man out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, he wiped out all the X-Men in like one page.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, he was swinging along through the corridors and he overheard something, so he, being Spider-Man and being very sneaky, snuck in and listened to it. And, he overheard the X-Men having a conversation about joining up with Magneto. And then Professor X, with his telepathy, recognized that Spider-Man was eavesdropping. At that point, Spider-Man basically drops from the ceiling and flicks with his finger, just does a little flick onto like the forehead of Professor X, knocks him out, and then just decimates the rest of the X-Men and like they were just little kids, and he's playing dodgeball with the biggest balls in the world.
Right. Right. It's like a professional athlete playing dodgeball. Like Billy Madison playing dodgeball against the kindergartners.
Yeah.
Smack
him in the face.
But in this case, it'd be Spider-Man playing dodgeball against the kindergartners.
Right, where Nightcrawler's like, I'm just as fast and agile as he is, and he knocks the shit out of him and says, not on your best day.
Yeah.
Or I think he webbed him up.
He webbed him up, yeah. But he does that to Rogue, and he swats Wolverine off with just a backhand.
Yep.
But then, when he's about to tell Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, what the X-Men's plan is, Xavier gets in his head, and he forgets everything, and then just takes off.
Yeah, because he
comes up saying, I don't know what his problem is.
Yeah. So that at that point, Cyclops and Reed Richards start talking about missing their wives because apparently Cyclops was on his honeymoon. I believe he married Madeline Pryor at that time. Because this is after Jean Grey.
Yeah. So
he and Madeline Pryor, who looks exactly like Jean Grey. But anyways, so he's on his honeymoon. Most of these people were taken at inopportune times in their lives. Like Reed Richards had Sue Richards at home they have a baby, plus she's pregnant with the baby, about to give birth at any time. And, it's the other interesting fact about that Professor X using that power on Spider-Man is it comes back to haunt him throughout the series, and he starts getting more. He starts getting. I wrote it down in my notes at some point, and I wrote it that the best way for me to put it was Professor X is getting a little Hitlery. I can't remember what episode it was. Oh, it was from issue 6 that I wrote it down for that he's getting a little Hitlery. But I mean, it leads up. It starts there. You know, that's where it real starts. And it's like it's almost as if now that he can walk, he's got this newfound confidence, and with that confidence comes arrogance.
Yes. Yes.
So okay, where do we go from there, Jason?
Okay. Now, just like we talked about, everybody gets a base. It's like Oprah, you get a base, and you get a base, and you get a base. Now at Doom base, because Doom has his own base, even though the rest of them have their own base, he's got his own base. But he somehow finds 2 willing female subjects to be part of his experimentations using all this alien technology that happens to be at their beck and call in all of these bases. And because there weren't enough villains, Doom creates 2 more.
Right.
And they become major players. These 2 become major players in there. There's Volcana and Titania.
Yeah, and they were from the there was a section of Denver that was taken and put into this world, and that's where these 2 came from. So it wasn't like they're just 2 random humans walking around in outer space.
Yeah. And that part is important because it leads to another hero that's added later.
Right.
The Denver part. So I'm glad you brought that up. But now we have 2 new strong female evil characters, not including the Enchantress, because we all know how powerful she is.
Right.
But when they come down, the first thing that she does or Titania does, is she sees the Wrecking Crew and she picks a fight with them.
Right.
Which
she tried to pick one with Absorbing Man, but he was just bored with it. He's like,
yeah.
And again, this comes down to that misogyny. He's like, I don't have anything to prove to a dame.
Yeah, to a dame.
Yeah. Oh, and while all this is going on, I'm going to just jump to something real quick. This is also the time when, Magneto and Wasp almost kiss, because I have it in my notes. I'm like, because, when you're in a dire situation with a storm like that, it breeds lust and carnal desires. Those type of situations always breed those. Watch a movie.
Yes.
Never a movie. Okay. So now Doom creates these 2, and they also this is where they first start fat shaming Volcana too.
Oh yeah.
Body shaming her, calling her fat and stuff like that. And you look at her and you're like, she's the same shape as She-Hulk. Would you call She-Hulk fat?
No.
Right. So I'm like, I'm just not getting it. Maybe it's because she's got really big boobs or whatever. But then she meets Molecule Man, and they start developing a relationship.
Right. And this is important here because up until now, people didn't understand how powerful, and I don't even think the writers of the comics understood how powerful a person that could control molecules in anything, could rearrange molecules to can change one element to another element. Didn't realize how powerful a person like that really could be, or how powerful that particular power really is.
Right. Yeah, but Doom recognized it right off the bat.
And yeah, Doom understood it, and that's how I think that they realized that. I don't even know if Molecule Man at this point fully understood his own potential.
Right. He didn't, because that comes in later.
Yeah.
But so Doom is like catering to Molecule Man, and Molecule Man's like, I don't know why I'm getting this. He's just really meek, and he's nervous, and he's basically Michael Cera.
Yes.
Anything he's played in, minus
He's the George Michael character from Arrested Development, the little boy.
Right, right. So, he's just unsure of everything. He's indecisive. He's nervous. He's anxious. So, at this point, though, they decide to launch attack on the hero base.
Yeah.
As soon as the storm's over, even Captain America said it the night before, as soon as this storm's over, they're going to attack. And so all of a sudden in the morning, Captain America wakes up, sun's shining, and Hulk is next to him. And he's like, Hulk, you're awake. Why didn't you wake me? They're going to attack any minute now. And then, boom, they attack. And, the bad guys pretty much win the day. And they, Enchantress, the bad guys didn't win. I missed something because they had Enchantress and some of the Wrecking Crew locked up.
In something that they called, and I love this, psychostasis.
Right. But Thor lets Enchantress out, and she teleports them away so they can talk privately. And he's trying to talk her into becoming a good guy. She's trying to seduce him and get him under her control. And then the bad guys come in to try to get their fallen comrades back because they're outnumbered, but they do a surprise attack. And they fight and they fight and they fight. And they get the best of them. They get their people back. And then, the good guys are running away. And at this point, the Wrecking Crew and Titania start throwing large objects at them. Yes. Which Hawkeye uses his last explosive arrow to split, and then Iron Man, who's carrying an unconscious Captain Marvel, holds his repulsors up and shoots them to blast the debris away.
Yeah.
So they're basically taking pop shots at the heroes from a distance, and then Molecule Man steps up and says, because now he's starting to gain some confidence from all the stuff Doom's telling him.
Yes.
So he's like, I can handle this. Plus, he wants to show off for Volcana because he wants to get some later. So, so he takes a mountain. He's like, see those mountains over there? And they're like, yeah. Well, now they're here. And he drops them on the heroes.
Yes. And it's like I'm reading it right here. Suddenly, unbelievably, a mountain range which would dwarf the Andes looms above them.
Right.
Now, Andes is the same mountain that if you've ever seen the movie Alive, or if you've ever seen the Triple Frontier movie, that's the mountain range that they have to go over in that movie too. So it's a big movie, or it's a big mountain range. And then he just drops it on the heroes. Right.
So at this point, the bad guys believe all the heroes are dead. And then Thor and Enchantress pop back in. And then Thor takes on all the bad guys. And right as he's about to get zapped by a disintegrating ray, he disappears. But it looks like the disintegrating ray hit him. So they believe they've killed Thor as well.
Yeah, because Ultron has a new disintegration ray. And shoots it at Thor, and then boom, Thor's gone.
Yeah, the only thing that's left is his helmet and parts of his cape.
Yeah.
So
Enchantress is actually upset about this. She's visibly shaken because she does actually have feelings for Thor.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, this is the part that gets me. If you use a disintegrating ray and you hit Thor, where the fuck is the hammer?
Right.
It would have hit the ground. If you don't see that hammer laying around, aren't you starting to think maybe we didn't get him?
Because you didn't disintegrate the hammer.
Right.
You're not disintegrated. The only way you can get rid of that is if you're Hela for some reason.
Right. So that while he's fighting them, they tell him they dropped a mountain on the heroes and blah, blah, blah. So then it flashes to the heroes under a mountain with the Hulk bracing himself and basically holding the entire mountain up on his back. While at the same time, you have Spider-Man, who has superhuman strength. You have She-Hulk, who has superhuman strength. Mm-hmm. You have Iron Man, with his suit of armor, has superhuman strength. So these are three other heroes that have superhuman strength that are doing nothing while Hulk is holding this thing up.
And
Plus, you have Captain Marvel, who can transform into fucking light and energy and get out whenever she wants.
And you said it there, and energy.
Yeah.
So she probably could have done something to.
Right.
Johnny Storm could have went supernova.
Right. And at this point, Hulk's getting angry, so he's starting to lose part of the Bruce Banner. And this is a theme that continues to go on through the series, where that Banner brain seems to be diminishing. And it actually started when they woke up that morning, because there was some dialogue with Hulk's inner thoughts where he was feeling off and wasn't feeling himself.
Right.
So
but I will say it does make for the coolest cover ever in comics. Yeah. Under 150 billion tons stands the Hulk, and he's not happy.
Yeah. So instead of waking these other three guys up to help have them, basically if the Hulk can hold it up with his back, adding this other strength, they could probably just flip it off them. But no. So what we have to do is we have to get Reed Richards involved, and he's got to take, the rest of Hawkeye's tech arrows and Spider-Man's web shooters and combine it with Iron Man's armor, and then have Captain Marvel and Human Torch, with Human Torch going Nova, holding onto these rods that are connected to Iron Man's armor so he can blow this huge hole out through it.
When it was so convoluted, when you're right, they could have just pushed it over.
Right. It would. I mean, you add these other three people. If the Hulk can hold it up by himself, yeah, he's struggling. Add these other three people, they could have just tossed the fucking thing off.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it in the 80s with Spider-Man when he was trapped under that building and he picked the whole building up to get out from underneath it.
Yeah, exactly.
He has the proportionate strength of a spider.
Yeah. This brings me back to back when we used to play the Marvel superheroes role-playing game, because they had the stat levels were awesome. Like in D&D, you had like 3 through 18, then you could get into like godlike and in giant strength or whatever. But they had the greatest names. There was like strength was like feeble through amazing.
Right.
They had like different adjectives for each different level.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, all of them had amazing strength.
Yes. And so, they could have easily lifted up, but we had to do, like you said, this convoluted thing to blow a hole up. So now they all escape the mountain, and while they're under the mountain, they hear a tapping, and then when they blow their hole out and they come out, there you see Thor.
Yeah.
And that's when you find out that he says, right as they were going to hit me with a disintegrating ray, I disappeared into a lightning bolt to make it look like they got me.
Yeah.
I fooled them.
Yep. So, yeah. And then after the mountain is dropped on to the heroes, Doom turns to the bad guys and says, okay, thank you. You guys did a good job. I applaud you. But one of you fuckers tried to kill me, because when Doom was taken off in a ship earlier, in previous issues, Kang the Conqueror shot him down with like some gun that was in the base.
Alien gun that he kind of like reworks instantly and then shoots Doom.
So at this point, Doom says, one of you tried to kill me. So then he has Ultron kill Kang.
Yeah.
And that's it. You never see Kang again. So he survived 2, maybe 3 episodes and was killed by his own team.
And that goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. There's originally talk or speculation that Kang the Conqueror would be the new Thanos going forward in the MCU after they finally defeat Thanos. Well, if he can't even make it to issue 4.
Right. And he's the master of time and space.
Yeah, right. But when the heroes get out, they trudge along, defeated, beat up, and they come into this alien village, right, where they start doing some hoodoo magic, and then the Human Torch falls in love with these slit-eyed aliens that speak in a weird language.
Her name was Saji.
Saji, yeah.
And
Just squiggles right now. You learn her name later.
Right. Well, as this is going on, though, we got a flash to Magneto's fortress, where the X-Men show up, like I said, as they were kissing and blah, blah, blah. And then they start talking to them, and then the Wasp reveals that she was just playing Magneto the entire time in his dreamy blue eyes.
Yeah.
Because at this time, back then, the Wasp got around.
Yeah, there was no her and Hank Pym.
Right. It was Wasp and pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
But then again, Tony Stark was the same way. So,
she was the office slut.
Right. So she reveals that she was playing him and escapes, and they decide not to chase her. And so, then we'll flash back to that later.
Yeah.
So then we get into issue number 5. Now, what's important also about this village that these heroes found is it's right underneath this mountain that Galactus has been standing on for 4 issues.
Yeah. And he's just been standing there.
Yeah. So they get there and they're a little iffy about this. And this is also in this issue where Molecule Man really starts getting this huge crush on Volcana.
Mm-hmm.
And then, since they're underneath him, Reed Richards elongates out to try to talk with Galactus. Because he's starting to figure out what Galactus is doing on that mountain. Because he's seen it before.
Yeah. But his attempts to communicate fail.
Right. And the reason behind that, because at the same time he's trying to do that, Professor X taps into Magneto's mind, and they combine their mental powers and try to communicate with Galactus, and it's pissing Galactus off. And so at this point, somebody says, well, what's he going to do? Stick his cat on us? And he does.
He does.
And what form did that cat take, Jason?
It was kind of cool, actually. It's this big ass robot looking thing, kind of like the thing at the beginning of the first Thor, or at the end of the first Thor thing, except for it's got kind of the Destroyer from that, and then Ultron, had a
baby.
If they had a baby, they had a love child. Kind of looked like that, but it just shows up and it just starts like Hulk smashing him.
Right. Yeah, that thing from Thor was called Annihilator.
Annihilator. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, and so they're fighting this thing. They beat it, and then the villains take an opportunity attack on them. But then the X-Men come in to save the day. And in the process, Colossus gets wounded, and after the X-Men come in to help them beat back the villains, they leave Colossus behind.
Mm.
And the X-Men aren't happy about that, but Professor X says, I trust Captain America will take care of him.
Right.
You're at this point, you're starting to see maybe Professor X and Magneto are a lot more similar than we thought.
Mm-hmm. So part of the X-Men in their ear, and this is to kind of emphasize that point, is Professor instantly takes in Magneto as an equal, as a part of the team. He did the same with Rogue. Rogue was a villain. Everybody knows her. She was the one that Anna Paquin played in the X-Men movies.
Right.
But she starts off as a villain, beating the hell out of the X-Men, and then she has kind of a change of heart and then becomes one of the becomes there, but it took them a while to take her in. She's on their team in this particular Secret Wars.
Right.
So,
she had just joined the X-Men before the Secret Wars had started.
Yeah, this was long before, but he has a history of taking what used to be rivals and allowing them to have a change of heart. So him siding with Magneto it's there's already a precedent set.
Right. And for those of you that only know Rogue through the X-Men movies, they completely fucked Rogue up.
Yes, they did.
Rogue got strong in flight and stuff like that because Captain Marvel, which is in the theaters now, Carol Danvers, she absorbed all Carol Danvers' powers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they got that right. She touches you, she absorbs everything about you, your memories, your powers, everything. So she was basically had Captain Marvel's powers, and at this point in comic book history, Captain Marvel is basically no more except for the African American.
Yes. Now, in episode 5, in issue 5, there's another part here with Molecule Man it's kind of interesting because now he's got himself a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And the Wrecking Crew comes out and starts fucking with him and his girlfriend. So what he ends up doing is turn the one dude's skin into steel and then slams him into the mud, and then his girlfriend monkey stomps his face.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, pile driver, that's who it was.
Yep. Yeah, and also an interesting thing is, after the X-Men leave Colossus, who's injured, Saji, the healer, goes to help him and to heal him. And Iron Man's there. And mind you, in this series, Iron Man is not Tony Stark. It's James Rhodes, another African American who was Tony Stark's buddy.
Yes. It was first it was Howard Terrence Howard, then it was Don Cheadle.
Right.
After Don Cheadle would do the role for cheaper, and that's what it ended up being.
Right. And at this time in comic book history, Tony Stark was just a drunk.
Yeah.
So James Rhodes took over the role of Iron Man, and a lot of people didn't know it.
And the Avengers here didn't know it.
Right.
Nobody in the team knew that it wasn't Tony Stark in the suit.
Right. So he's sitting there basically cradling a falling Colossus, trying to get Saji to heal him, and then basically, Human Torch is like, why are you helping that mutant scum, and blah blah blah, and and James Rhodes, Iron Man, basically calls him out for racism. He's like, if you saw he was black, that'd make it even worse, or something like that, something along those lines. I mean, you got the comic there. You could probably read the quote. It's around the end of issue number 5.
Yeah.
But Human Torch is basically being a racist piece of shit throughout most of this comic book series, and a misogynist. He falls in love with Saji, but just treats her as a piece of tail.
Well, a hippie
is what he called her.
Yeah, he calls her hippie, but she only kisses him to get him to stop singing Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Thank God, yeah. I can't blame her for that. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's the last couple pages of that comic book.
Yeah, I'll find it here in a second.
Yeah. So, they have this dialogue, and Human Torch doesn't really say anything back, but this is Stan Lee's, basically, like I said earlier, civil rights thing. But it's for mutants, and that's why he created the mutants, is to kind of help propel that along, to help mend the division between, and show basically mutants in comic books and Marvel Universe are African Americans in society. They're treated like that. They're treated like they were back in the day.
I'll find it. But anyway, yeah, you're right. It's the
here. I'll go find it. You talk.
No, it's not in episode. It's not in 5.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Let me go check. I'll be back.
Anyway, so this whole part with Zaji is kind of interesting because for some reason you have an alien love interest in a story that's about good versus evil. They always have to throw in your typical little love interest part in there, but Colossus falls in love with her. Human Torch falls in love with her. I'm surprised that they didn't have other people fall in love with her too. But Human Torch tries to kiss her, or he's trying to woo her, and all he does is he sings Thriller.
Right.
And to get him to stop, she finally kisses him.
Okay, I found it. All right. So here, I'll show it. This is the page. Step closer to the bottom. It's like the last 2 pages. So Iron Man's holding on to Colossus, who's now in human form, not in his metal form. He says, "Hey, Hotshot, we got a badly wounded man here. Can you get your medic girlfriend to take a look?" Human Torch says, "I'll try, but who knows if she can help a mutant? I mean, they're not exactly normal humans. He's a whole different species." And she says, "Squiggly line, squiggly line, squiggly line." So then Iron Man says, "Let me get this straight. A guy who can burst into flames has doubt that this broad from planet Mongo can help this mutant dude. Thank God he ain't black, huh?" So where Human Torch says, "Knock it off, Shellhud. You know what I meant." So yeah, that's basically it.
Oh, okay. That wasn't the spot. That wasn't the one I was thinking of then, because there's another Rhodes one. That's when you finally realize that it's not Tony in the suit.
Yeah, that's what with Reed Richards and
Yeah.
later on. So that was issue number 5. So now we go to issue number 6. And then, yep, go ahead.
So at the beginning of issue 6, this is where we find that Wasp is taken off from Magneto, because otherwise Magneto was going to F her up.
Right.
He already wrapped scrap metal around her in a ball.
Right.
So she takes off, and now she's flying a little ship, and it's crashing, it's hopping, it's doing like this, it's like skipping a stone across the water, and
like a 3-year-old trying to drive your car.
Yeah, right. And when she finally comes to a stop, she's in a swamp. But who else likes swamps? What creatures find in swamps?
Yeah, somebody who we haven't seen since the first issue, basically.
Since the first couple of pages, the first 2 or 3 pages, and this guy's been out longer than Kang was in.
Right.
We're talking about the Lizard.
Right, Doc Connors.
So she kind of gets into a fight with the Lizard right away. So but there's a big development that happened in 5 that we didn't talk about, was this solar system sized ship.
Oh yeah.
That kind of looks like the infinity symbol shows up, and it's Galactus's ship.
Yeah, it's his homeworld.
Yes. So Galactus has brought this to Battleworld. So now shit's getting real. Time is ticking. Galactus is going to eat this planet.
Galactus is hungry. Yep, and it's in issue 6 where Professor X gets a little Hitlery. But yeah, so Wasp runs into Lizard in the swamp, finds out he's wounded, and like you do with animals, you treat their wounds and they become your best friend.
Yes.
And then what should transpire? Then we're back to the homeworld thing, and Doom has gotten onto there.
Yes. Doom somehow manages to get into the ship, and he starts messing with Galactus's homeworld technology and releases a being called Claw.
Right.
Claw is just a being of, like Captain Marvel's a being of pure energy. Claw is a being of sound that's manifested into physical form.
Right.
But he's been trapped in here, and he's gone completely insane.
Yeah. And he was trapped there because he was absorbed. Dazzler is a hero who absorbs sound and uses it as a weapon in light form. And she had absorbed Claw because he's made of sound.
Yes.
And she faced off against Galactus at one point and shot her most powerful blast at Galactus, which released Claw, but then he got trapped in Galactus's homeworld.
Yeah. Now, side thing, Dazzler, Howard the Duck, and a couple others are coming to television, not like Netflix, but they're coming to like Adult Swim or something like that, but as cartoon series.
Cool.
Written by Kevin Smith is penning one of them. There's 4 cartoons in total. I can't remember the other 2. Kevin Smith of Clerks fame is writing one of them, and then Patton Oswalt is part of the writing team for another one of them.
Cool.
Yeah, so they're supposed to just be nothing really to do with the MCU. They're just supposed to be
standalone
Marvel stories about characters that they aren't going to bring to the screen other than little cameos.
Right. And so, back to this. So Doom sends Claw back. He transports him back to Doom Base to give everybody his orders. And they weren't going to listen to him, but he said the keyword, so Ultron listened to him and said that you will follow Doom's orders. And then it flashes to the X-Men, and this is where Professor X gets a little Hitlery. Because at this time, Storm is the leader of the X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he says, I've always been the leader. You were the field general. Now I'm leading all parts of it. And you will either, follow my commands, or I will manipulate your mind so you do follow my commands.
Yeah. And those are words that are really coming out of Magneto's mouth, because that's what Magneto would have said.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just a little bit creepy to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, it goes back, and at this point too, Saji is healing Colossus, and Colossus, who's been just heartbroken for 6 issues because Kitty Pryde is still on Earth and he misses her so much, and blah blah blah. She's the love of his life. He's gonna marry her.
Time out.
Yeah.
Peter is Colossus. I'm pretty sure he's got to be in his 30s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, actually, in the comic books, he was only like 17.
Okay. So that makes it a little bit better because Kitty Pryde was 14.
Right. It's just his size and stuff that makes him look older.
Yeah, maybe it's okay in Mother Russia, but here in the States, that's still wrong.
Right. So, but at this point, now he's falling in love with Saji. Yeah. I'm like, dude, way to stay true to the love of your fucking life.
I think there's something going on with this alien girl anyway.
Right. Right.
The eyes are hypnotizing or something.
Well, there's also something. There are so many stories out there where somebody falls for somebody that nurses them back to health.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the arc they were going with,
It's like some kind of weird Stockholm syndrome or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's another syndrome that deals with people falling in love with their doctor.
Right. And, at this point, She-Hulk and Hulk are getting pissed at Captain America because they still haven't gone after Wasp. Magneto's got him. And this is, another example of Hulk starting to lose the Banner mind, where he's starting to act more on emotions than he is on logic. So we kind of go through that for a bit. And then, hey, look, Captain Marvel transforms into light and flies off. Wonder why she do that under a mountain. She's holding her boots.
Right. Why?
Yeah, I don't know, because they're light as well.
Yes.
Here, I'll show you people. I don't know if you can see it. Let me know. Can you see that, Jace?
Yep.
Okay, see, she's carrying her fucking boots.
Which
those boots are only made for walking.
Yeah, and so I know, but I'm not in the mood for the single bar chit chat. And then she takes off.
Right. Then she says, strange. I always thought Iron Man was so sophisticated, worldly. It says, though a different man were inside that armor lately. And he certainly isn't my type.
Or is he?
Right.
We don't know that yet. But, so, right after that is when the X-Men that show up at the same place that Magneto, Titania, the Wrecking Crew,
Molecule Man, not Magneto.
Molecule Man and Dr. Octopus are.
Right.
But it's not all the X-Men right now. We've just got Rogue, Cyclops, and Wolverine.
Right. And throughout this whole time, every time you see Rogue, she's always considering if she made the right choice to join the X-Men.
Yeah.
And that's getting, at this point, I wrote it down because at that point it was getting really fucking old to me. Like, you have all this power. Quit being a chicken shit.
And so she has an interesting dilemma within her anyway that no other character that's in the Secret Wars has. She can change her powers because all she has to do is touch somebody else.
Right.
So if she wanted to, she could touch Captain Marvel, fly over, touch Doctor Doom, and then all of a sudden she knows all their secrets.
Right. Yeah. So, but what Molecule Man was trying to do was to set off the volcano to distract Galactus, so to slow him down on eating the world.
Yes, to buy him a little bit of time.
So when the 3 X-Men get there, they tussle, and Wolverine ends up slashing Molecule Man and wounding him really bad. So the bad guys take off with Molecule Man, and then Cyclops goes up to the volcano, and because apparently he is psychic too, knows what Molecule Man was going to do, so he uses optic blast and blasts the volcano, and then they take off.
Yeah, he ends up doing exactly what Molecule Man was there to do. If they just would have worked together, they probably could have done it really easy.
Right. But then we cut away from that as they're flying away in their ship to get away from all the volcanoes blowing up. Then we go back to the swamp where this weird bulldozer type construction tank type thing goes into the swamp.
If you've ever seen Fern Gully, it's like the giant tree devourer machine from that.
And a laser shoots Wasp right through the heart.
Yeah. Now, obviously at this point, Lizard is best friends with Wasp. So he's like, "You killed the woman, rawr!" And he starts to attack the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
And does a really good job at it at first.
Right. And I think that pretty much ends. Was there anything else that happened in number 6?
No, they just look up at Galactus building his machine on top of the mountain to devour the world.
Oh, I know what happened at the end. At the end of number 6, the heroes are all in the village, and there's a silhouette that's watching them.
Oh, okay.
Who could it be? Let's go to issue 7 and find out.
So,
go ahead.
This is where I said, remember Denver.
Right.
Because there's a person that comes around the corner that is dressed like what you know as Venom, with a long ponytail, who says, "I'm Spider-Woman."
Right.
They're like, don't we have like a registry of superheroes and we kind of know everybody? So if you were in Denver this whole time, maybe the news would have caught you. Maybe it would have made the nightly news. Maybe it would have made CNN. We would have heard about you or something. No?
Right.
Okay. Huh. Welcome to the team. Spider-Woman.
Right. And Spider-Man's like going, I wonder if I could sue her for trademark infringement.
Right.
Because, that's the whole charisma when it comes to Spider-Man, what draws people to Spider-Man, isn't because so much that he's a superhero, it's his wit. He is barring Deadpool, who is the funniest character in Marvel Universe, Spider-Man's got to be the second funniest.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
That's why I will say I enjoyed the Tom Holland Spider-Man more, because I think the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies were better than the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, I felt. But I felt Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was better, because I felt that he finally captured some of the wit
Right.
Then the Tom Holland, they captured, not only did he capture the wit, but he also captured the social awkwardness of an
Yeah.
actual teenager
Yeah.
at the time. So I think that this, especially Homecoming, which was, I think, was hysterical. Especially, you have a child who's setting up his phone so that he could record himself jumping in and taking Captain America's.
Right. Right.
But that's what we really liked about this. But this woman comes in, it's like all business. Just, I'm Spider-Woman. Hey,
Yep.
what's up?
Yep. Bow down to me. This is what we're doing. Yep.
But as we're getting to know, but we're not really even getting to know Spider-Woman. There's like, they're like, oh, okay, I guess you're part of the team now. That same tank thing from the Fern Gully vehicle from the swamp that picked up the lizard out there comes rolling through, and they chuck the wasp body out. They say, here, catch.
Right. And they fight a little bit, but then they get away. And then we flash back to Doom Base, and everybody's fat shaming Volcana again. This was getting old to me really quick. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, she's not even fucking fat.
Right.
If anything, she has a little bit of a voluptuous figure, but she is far from fucking fat.
Exactly.
I mean, she's
the warrior princess fat.
Right. Right. So then Wolverine, Cyclops, and Rogue were going to head back to Magneto's lair, but Professor X stops them and says, no, we have to go after the vehicle that's transporting Molecule Man. We're going to meet you. So they all meet up and tussle with them. And at this point, Absorbing Man, for those that don't know, he has the ability to absorb any material he touches. So he touched rock and became rock.
Mm-hmm.
But he can still move in that form and everything else. Well, as they're fighting, Wolverine, whose adamantium claws can cut through anything, cuts off his arm. But this is the part that I don't get. All 3 claws went through the arm. There weren't 4 different pieces of arm. It just cut it in 2.
Yes. Just a perfect slice. It didn't break, didn't shatter.
Right. So, I mean, now Absorbing Man's sitting here holding his arm that has his wrecking ball in it, and he's just like staring at it, not knowing what the fuck to do. And he's out of the fight.
So it seems like he should just be able to put it right back up there, and then turn back to skin, or turn to something, touch a different rock,
Right.
And be attached again.
Right. So while all this is going on and the volcanoes are erupting, they finally distract Galactus. And you get a little insight into Galactus. He's like, man, I want to eat this world, but now I got to fix the world before I can eat it.
Mm.
And then he realizes Doom is in his homeworld and just flicks him out.
Yeah, just like, we're going to Orkin you out.
Right.
But this is where Galactus learns that there's more than 2 steps. It's cooking.
Right. Right. Yeah. So he's figuring that out. And then we flash back to Doom Base. And now Absorbing Man has his arm, and he's thinking, do I just put it here and transfer back to a human? Or what do I do? So he decides to do it. And then the arm reattaches, and it hurt like hell, but hey, I got my arm back. Yay.
Yay. We didn't need 11 panels of that.
Right. So we have a very pissed off She-Hulk who's tired of waiting. What does she do, Jason?
She gets pissed off and runs away.
Where'd she run to?
Well, so what She-Hulk is upset because when they're looking at Wasp, she's basically dead. There's nothing Zaji can do about it. And she's dead for all intents and purposes. So she's mad because she wanted to, from the beginning, to go save her so she wouldn't end up like this. But she doesn't know the whole story, that it wasn't Magneto that killed her. Everything. So she gets pissed off, and when she runs out, I forgot where she went.
She went to the Doom base.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. She runs. There you go. Yeah, she runs in and just starts fucking up the wrecking crew and Absorbing Man.
Yeah.
Just comes in, just boom, 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 and then she fights Titania, which hits her with this huge piece of metal, and then slams her into a wall, and that's when the wrecking crew regain their wits about them, and then they just start pummeling her with everything that they have.
And then Dr. Octopus gets involved in it as well.
Yeah, he starts punching her and all this. Meanwhile, Captain America's sitting on a rock watching Galactus, going, "Huh,
right."
Tall.
And the Hulk's like, "Hey, it's my cousin. I want to go help her." And he's like, "We can't help her."
Could, but the answer is no.
Right. And then he gets a message in his mind from Professor X who says, "Go get She-Hulk. We'll watch Colossus, and we'll attack if he starts doing anything."
Yeah. So then they're like, "All right, let's go get these butchers."
Right. So now we jump to issue 8, where the heroes attack the Doom base to get She-Hulk.
Okay, so issue 8 is probably my favorite comic cover is issue 4 with Hulk holding up the mountain.
Yeah.
This is probably the most iconic cover. It's the one that everybody will see from now on. And because without you're about to say something.
Yeah. Other thing to know about issue 8 is also the hardest issue to find.
Yeah. And here's why. For those that are looking, that it's introducing a character that you don't even know is a real character yet.
Right.
They just made a movie with him, with Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Yes. This is Venom.
Yeah.
But you don't know it's Venom yet.
Yeah. So without Secret Wars, you wouldn't have Venom.
Right. And without Spider-Woman's black costume, you wouldn't have Venom looking like this.
Right.
But we'll go into how Peter acquires the symbiote.
Right. So
the heroes are invading.
Yes. So they go in, they pretty much beat the fuck out of everybody, capture everybody. Go ahead.
Which it should have happened from the first.
Yeah.
Other than the Enchantress and Doctor Doom, especially after Kang was killed, and Ultron, there's nobody that can match the power of what you have on the hero side. That's left. I mean, you have Thor and Doom match, or Thor and the Enchantress match out, Hulk and Doom match out. Then you've got everybody else on Kang and the Wrecking Crew with Dr. Octopus. Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus cancel out.
Right.
So you're left with the Lizard, a couple guys with some demolition tools.
And honestly, I've read issues where Spider-Man's fought Dr. Octopus and Lizard at the same time.
Right.
And won.
So in reality, and She-Hulk takes out Titania. So in reality, there's nobody that this should have been a quick battle.
Yeah.
Because we hadn't even talked about the X-Men yet being a part of this.
Right.
Because there are just as many of them as there are the villains.
Right. Yeah. So this is the part that cracks me up. So they go in, they beat the fuck out of everybody, capture them all, and take over their base because their base got destroyed by the bad guys in several issues earlier. So now Doom base is now Hero base.
Right.
And Colossus is still in the town with Saji and going, "Oh, I'm in love with Saji, but I can't remember Kitty Pryde anymore."
I don't remember her name. What was her name? That little girl, her name.
Right.
Not Ellen Page.
Right. So they take over that, and then Colossus sees Saji come out of the building that Wasp's body was held in and collapse. So he goes out to rescue her, and then Hawkeye and somebody else, I think it was Captain Marvel, took some Quinjet type thing back to the village because they were going to get Wasp's body to take it back there and have an Avengers-style burial the next day.
Yeah.
And they show up to see Wasp is alive. She was not quite dead yet. She was nearly dead.
Right. No, she said to blave, which means to bluff.
Right. And then at the end of this issue, Galactus is finally ready to eat the world.
Yeah. But one of the coolest scenes in all of this is Johnny Storm taking out Ultron.
Yeah.
Because he just wraps up Ultron and then goes supernova. It just like is the power of an exploding star and just melts everything around him, and it fried the inside workings of Ultron, and Ultron is now incapacitated.
Right.
So,
yeah, I forgot about that. That was pretty cool. I mean, that shows the power that the Human Torch has, that is so, and he's so underutilized. There are so many heroes with so much potential that they never really utilize.
yeah.
And that frustrates me.
And so this is, at the end of this issue, might be the most iconic part of all the Secret Wars that we talked about at the beginning of talking about this thing, is when Spider-Man tries to use this alien device that he saw, was it Professor X use earlier?
No, Thor and Hulk came out with Thor had his helmet back and his cape back, and he's like, "Hey, how'd you get your helmet and cape back?" He's like, "Oh, showed me a machine that will make any clothes that you want."
That's what it was. Because Spider-Man's costume is tattered, but he goes into what he thinks is the machine that does this, and out drops this little black ball. And when he goes to pick it up, it starts covering his hand and then covers his entire body until you realize he's got this like living suit now.
Right.
AKA Venom.
Right. And then it goes in issue 9 is where he really talks about it, because in issue 9 he goes and shows everybody else, including Reed Richards and Captain America, and he makes this little joke. He's like, "It does whatever my mind tells it to." And then look, then all of a sudden there's no sleeves and no legs. He's like, "Short sleeves for summer."
Yeah.
And then Reed Richards like, "Well, you know," and this is something I want to touch on too. He's like, "Well, you know, I'd love to go over that in my lab if we ever get back to my lab." He's like, "Well, I guess I'm just being defeatist." But you see this with a lot of the heroes, that mentality, because the Hulk has that mentality. Colossus has that mentality where they're just, and the Thing, which we forgot to mention, has been transforming from rock to human.
Yeah, he's been losing his rocks, the whole time.
His rocks are off.
He lost his marbles.
Right. So, but they're all going through this internal dilemma of this just defeatist mentality. And maybe that's why they're losing to these low-level villains.
Yeah, maybe. Just maybe. But at this point, Spider-Man's got a new suit. Thor's got a new hat. He's got a new cape. Hulk has got some new pants. And they're all looking stylish and profiling. And this is when the X-Men realize that Colossus is this close. So when they're starting to realize this, Storm attacks Colossus with this big ass lightning bolt, and Storm, doing Storm. Yeah, Galactus. Who did I say?
Colossus.
Oh, yeah, Galactus. There's so many us's.
Yeah.
Names in there. So Storm is raining down lightning bolts on him, and this ball from kind of looks like a wiffle ball but giant, starts flying down the hill, and it starts putting out like force fields and just starts fucking up the X-Men. It's just a ball. It's kind of like Phantasm, but like with like wiffle balls. And when it's flying around, Nightcrawler, teleports on top of it, and before it could disable his sensors, he ends up redirecting it. It flies away and explodes with like the might of like a 100 megaton, nuclear blast. with hopefully minus the fallout because they would all end up dying anyway. But Galactus is unfazed by this drone. But everybody's looking on in horror as they see this huge explosion. So they realize that the time is now that we need to go and fight off Galactus. But while they're doing this, the Thing is he's still changing in and out of rock, and then finally he gets his rocks back, and he's like, he's excited, he's ready to go. And Spider-Man, this is when, as Craig alluded to, was talking about his new suit. But everybody is to this point where the only thing that we can do now is, in fact, attack Colossus, and they're in the ship.
Galactus.
The flight, yeah, like fuck Colossus. He's in love with a 14-year-old little girl,
right,
and an alien at the same time.
Well, and when they all, and to kind of interject there, when they all decide to attack Galactus, Reed Richards suffers an epiphany. And this epiphany that that hits him is, if he lets Galactus win, and the Beyonder gives Galactus whatever it is that he wants, he's going to take away his hunger. So yes, they may sacrifice their lives, but they could rid the universe of Galactus forever.
Yeah. Which would be huge, because it's always been a looming fear that Galactus would come and devour Earth.
Right. I mean, he sent his, what do you call it?
His heralds.
His heralds to Earth many times.
Yeah. Most of them. There was Silver Surfer's probably the most popular.
Yeah.
But like World Breaker Hulk becomes, there's a story of World Breaker Hulk becomes the Herald of Galactus for a while. And
yeah.
And there's a story where Franklin Richards, the son that Sue's pregnant with right now, that Reed is going, oh, poor pitiful me. Woe is me. That child makes Galactus his herald.
Oh, nice.
So but that's where I would say Franklin is on the same level as the Beyonder, but that's a different story.
Right. So now they all attack Galactus, and then is this where Galactus disappears back to his home ship and takes Reed with him?
Yes.
Okay. So he takes Reed Richards with him and says that Reed is like the, what do you call him, the savior, or the champion of life, or something along those lines. But anyways, he's basically saying, hey, I've got to eat, you've got to save people. And then so Reed's got this dilemma: do I save these people, or do I let Galactus win? And then he ends up deciding, okay, you know what? I want to see my kid get born. We're going to fight.
Yeah. Put him up.
So because he's got Thing and Johnny Storm backing him up, saying, okay, if Stretchy says that we're not fighting, we're not fighting.
Yeah.
And then he changes his mind, like an indecisive 13-year-old.
Stretchy.
So that brings us up to issue 10, I believe.
Yes.
And in issue 10, this is when, Galactus decides that at the end of issue 9 and into issue 10, he decides that because they were fucking up his machine and stuff, he decided to eat his home world, because his ship is an actual planet.
Yeah.
So he decides he's going to eat this, and Doom sees this coming and starts devising a plan.
Doom plan.
Right.
Bad.
Right. Doom never has a good plan. And while a lot of this stuff was going on, there was another issue with Magneto and mutants and basically racism going on at the time. And, Captain America's calling out Magneto for being a racist, and Wolverine has the best line I've ever heard. He says, terrorists, that's what the big army calls the little army.
I like that.
Yep, I did too. So now Galactus's homeworld is going all super light and shit and blinding everybody down on the planet, and he's getting ready to eat it, and he's like, "Oh, here it comes! It's coming in!" And then Doom had sliced up Claw, used him as like an energy receptor, and siphoned all the energy into himself.
Yeah.
Say what you will, Doom's a fucking genius.
Right. That's why he's hands down my favorite villain.
Yeah.
Of all time, just because his backstory and that his ability to,
adapt and overcome.
Yeah. So,
I mean, earlier in the series, he was beaten down and he had given up, and he was trapped with everybody else when the heroes took over Doom Base, and he was left powerless, and they didn't take off his armor because they were worried about booby traps.
Yeah.
And then he all of a sudden decides, I'm gonna go steal Galactus' power, activates something, blows the door off, and walks out.
And there was actually, he was so down at one time in this that he was falling for some of the Enchantress's tricks where she said she could heal his face. He was like, "You can do that?"
Right.
So Doom still has not, I won't say sensibilities or sensitivities, but he was vulnerable earlier, but now, I mean, Doom is powerful. He's took all that energy that Galactus was going to absorb and eat, and he has it.
Yep. And what does he do with said power?
Well, he starts fucking up people until he gets fucked up.
Well, didn't he take the power and decide he's going to go fight Beyonder?
He does, yeah. He takes off and he flies. He goes to try to go through the ripple to take on the Beyonder in his own realm.
Right. And while he's there, he's fighting him. He's actually getting his ass handed to him. And at that point, he appears to the heroes and says, I have beaten Beyonder back. I have done this. I have done that. If you just lend me your power, we can overthrow him for good, and Beyonder will be no more. And none of the heroes are biting, but Magneto starts going towards him, and he's going to do it. But then before he does, he looks over at Professor Xavier and stops, and then he's tackled by Hawkeye and Iron Man.
Yeah.
And that's when the whole Magneto Captain America shit went down.
Yeah. So Doom just gets ripped apart throughout like the next 4 or 5 pages. You start to see his history. His armors are getting ripped off. You're seeing the shell of a man that he is, and Doom is just getting beaten up. Well, meanwhile, the world is going into the battle world itself is going into chaos.
Right.
And the X-Men are fighting they're fighting the bad guys, and they're fighting the Avengers, and just everything. Chaos is going on everywhere at this time.
Right. And like the shockwaves from the battle between Doom and Beyonder are hitting the world and causing what feels like earthquakes and shit like that.
And then near the end of the episode or issue, this huge light just fills the sky, and Doom is like taller than Colossus coming out of this.
Galactus.
Yeah. I like Colossus. No, I don't.
Okay. You like? Okay.
I liked him in Deadpool too.
Right.
But anyway, Doom is as tall as Galactus, if not taller, and he's like Hulk smash, he's like and everybody stops and like, oh my god, and then Doom shrinks down to their size, removes his mask to reveal that he is the new Beyonder.
Right, he is fully healed.
Yes.
All of his all of his vanity issues are solved.
Yes. He got some eczema. He cleared that shit up.
Right. And, after he comes back and he's basically communicating with both sides, he taps Molecule Man's head and unlocks something in his brain. Because apparently Molecule Man had this wall of head that stopped him from reaching his full potential. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, he unlocked that potential. So at that point, Molecule Man gets all the villains and everybody else, or all the villains, the bad guys that are still left and still alive, besides Claw and Doom, and takes them to the Denver suburb that was brought up there, puts a dome over it, rips it off the planet, and starts heading home.
Which, good for you if you know which way home is.
Right. Somehow they do, because they made it back, but you don't really ever see them make it back.
No.
It's just pretty much, it's that trick of movies and comic books. It's basically let the viewer fill in the blank.
Yes.
It's like in between the panels of comic books, those are called gutters. And those gutters are, you fill in the blank between one panel and the next. There's your lesson for free, and I teach that.
Nice.
Oh. Yeah, so, but also at this time, you start seeing heroes getting possessed.
Right.
And, they're under somebody else's control. Like, the Hulk all of a sudden wakes up and starts walking, and the new Spider-Woman tries talking to him, and he just continues to walk and doesn't acknowledge her or anything, so she sets up a web, and the way she waves the web looked like she was taking a dump.
Yeah, and it's like she squatted and it shot out like a perfect web, not web shooter thing like a actual spider web.
Right. It was kind of creepy. I'm not gonna lie. So she puts up this web, and Hulk is just trying to walk through it, and just keeps straining through it until he finally breaks through it, and then whatever has got the Hulk jumps to her.
Yeah.
Hulk collapses on the floor and is asleep.
And this keeps happening until the heroes wake up in their base the next morning, and it says, "You are summoned to the Tower of Doom at dusk tomorrow." So in huge letters, graffitied on the wall. Right.
Banksy would be proud.
Exactly. So this is the first time you see the new Tower of Doom, which is this golden rock formation that shoots up.
Somewhat phallic.
Yeah. Thousands of miles into I'm sure it's because it's comics and their bases were the size of Chicago.
Right.
This probably shoots up, a couple thousand miles.
Right, because you need a base the size of Chicago for 20 people.
Right. You'll never see each other.
Right. That part killed me. Yeah, up on level 451. When did you have time to explore something the size of Chicago?
Right. And I'm sorry if you're at 451. It's like a 5-minute elevator ride.
Right. Granted, you do have Captain Marvel who could transverse the whole thing in a second at the speed of light to explore it. But still, it was just insane to me. Just absolutely fucking insane. So, are we still in the... So, at the end of issue 11, all of a sudden, all the heroes are in one place, and this beam of light, like a laser, comes down and annihilates everyone.
Yes.
And that's how issue 11 ends.
Yes. And they make the weirdest noise.
Right.
So with this, we open up with issue 12, and the opening panel of issue 12 makes it look like you're looking at a torn up movie poster of Captain America, because the shield is ripped apart. It's on fire. It's smoldering. You're seeing other just chaos all around. But having a vibranium shield ripped apart like that, you bet your sweet bippy the only thing left elsewhere in there is Wolverine's skeleton.
Right. Yeah, no shit. So then we go to after everything is blown to shit. We see Saji standing up on the rocks, going, "Oh, she fears for the worst."
Then it gets to the part that I find one of the funniest parts of the whole thing is Enchantress and the Wrecking Crew with Dr. Octopus are just like hanging out in an apartment.
Yeah.
Like Thunderball's on the ground reading a book.
Yeah.
The Absorbing Man just kicking back on the couch.
Right.
And Enchantress is drawing herself a bath.
Yeah. And in said bath, she summons an elemental.
Yes.
And they have a conversation. And they talk. And I'm reading it at the moment because I couldn't finish reading this one.
Oh.
So I'll let you tell it.
So she gets what she's trying to get out of the elemental did Doom win? Is the Beyonder dead? And she starts fucking the elemental up. I've never seen water get slammed around like this before, but
right.
And this is when she pretty much says, you know what, no, he didn't. And the villains start going nuts. And especially what's that?
Well, I mean, you got to think of it this way. You've got a wild creature in the lizard and a ton of narcissistic, egotistical, testosterone-flowing goons all in the same apartment.
With somebody who is just as big a trickster, if not more, than Loki himself in the Enchantress.
Right. Exactly.
So she's an instigator. So she's going to get them to start fighting. Just because for her it's fun.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And so, they start fighting amongst themselves, and Dr. Octopus goes after, and she does all this because at one point during the series, when Molecule Man got hurt, Volcana had gone to her and said, "You have to teleport me to Molecule Man. I have to be with him, blah, 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 blah." She's like, "Well, I guess if you do me a favor down the road, I'll do this for you." And what that favor turns out to be is you find out while she's getting everybody else fighting amongst themselves, she wants to go back to Asgard. Only way to do that is to suck the life force out of Volcana.
Mm.
So she's trying to do that while everybody's fighting, and finally Molecule Man's had enough and just wraps up Dr. Octopus in concrete. Then realizes that then Lizard tells him that the Enchantress took Volcana. So they go to save her.
And then presto changeo, where they end up going is not Asgard. They're back on Battleworld.
I didn't notice that part, but that's funny. But it's just Lizard and Enchantress, right?
Yes.
And then looks like she killed him. But did she? It is comic books. I guess we'll find out later in the issue.
Nobody else has died. Because Kang does come back for a half a second before the big bolt comes down.
Oh, okay.
Kang makes an appearance. He gets resurrected by Doom just in time for everybody else to get fucked up. Kang's like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" "Oh, fuck. Really?"
Yeah. So at this point, we're bouncing around, and it's a lot of dialogue between Doom and Claw, and Doom's having a hard time containing all of this power. If he doesn't focus his attention at all time and his concentration at all times, this power is going to get the best of him.
And he's starting to crack at times until Mjolnir bursts through the wall. Thor's hammer bursts through the wall, and he's like, "Oh, they're all dead."
Yeah.
Doom's like, "They're all dead," and then him and Kang start having a dialogue again. Then he realizes that no, they're not dead.
Right.
They're coming, even though Cap's shield is messed up and everybody else seems to be alive. Storm is carrying Professor X. And the other thing too in this we didn't mention is Professor X is not in a wheelchair.
Oh, I said something about it earlier because he.
Oh, did you? Okay, I missed that. Yep. But So they're coming in, and all of a sudden, it's like Claw is the one that's like starting to like create creatures to
Right.
send off after
Well,
everybody.
Doom gave him some of the Beyonder power.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yep.
That must have been in the dialogue because
Yeah.
I wasn't reading that shit.
It was right after the hammer came through. Doom is having a hard time controlling the power, then Claw's down on his knees in front of him, and they touch fingertips like the whole fucking painting.
Oh,
got.
right.
And then he comes out and he starts creating these really kind of like them, the creatures.
There's some are really cool.
Yep.
It's reminiscent to what Star-Lord said he would make after he realized that he's part eternal.
Right.
I can make a planet like this. Well, yeah, if it takes a couple 100 million years, but you can do it yourself. It's like, oh man, I'm making some weird shit like Pac-Man mixed with Heather Locklear.
Right.
So
we spend the next couple pages with the heroes fighting these monsters. Ben Grimm, the Thing, starts losing his rocks, but then gets his rocks back. I can't say that without laughing. I'm really sorry.
One of the things that Claw brings back was Ultron.
Yes.
So Ultron is fighting, and he's damaged by the Hulk, and he shoots the Hulk in the leg, and the Hulk gets hurt.
Right. And then all of a sudden, Ultron goes a little wacky, and all of his pieces fall apart. And then the Wasp flies out from inside him.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they have done that? And okay, I'm going to back everything up. At the time this came out, Wasp was the leader of the Avengers. But they chose Captain America as their leader throughout this whole series because of his battle experience. And honestly, why wouldn't you pick Captain America? He's a natural born leader.
Yeah.
But another underutilized member in this comic book.
Yeah. And she's a lot. We'll say that the Wasp character from Ant-Man and the Wasp hasn't become what she does become.
Right.
Because she's still, she knows how to use her powers. She's smart, but she becomes a lot more battle tested.
Right. And now while all these heroes are fighting these monsters, Captain America slips past them. And he's just got Claw to beat. So he does this little going off the floor, kick him in the face, knock him unconscious thing. But it's all a ruse.
Because Claw wakes up and says, perfect.
So then Captain America runs in and sees Doom. And they have dialogue, which honestly we don't care about anymore.
No, you die, no, you die, no, you die, I die, you die, he die, we die, they die, we all die.
Yep, and the whole time, Claw's still back there going, perfect, hee hee. So Doom blasts Captain America's hand, says, die, Avenger, and Captain America dies, disappears, he's a pile of dust. And then he's back. And Doom's like, no! So he does it again, and then he's back. And this keeps happening. And so they continue to fight through several pages until finally the power gets sucked out of Doom, I believe.
Yes.
And the Beyonder reclaims his power. And it turns out the Beyonder had possessed Claw. So, whenever he would kill Captain America, Claw would bring him back.
Yes. So this is where Doom is just kind of laying there, and everybody's like, oh, hey, I guess it's over. And this is where Colossus is standing over the grave of Zaji.
Yes.
It's like your alien girlfriend has died, but your real girlfriend is in the world is still there.
Right. And you're going to go home and say, hi, honey, I missed you.
And you're not even metal at the moment.
Right. And, this is one of the first comic books really that had closure, too. I mean, you see what happens after the whole battle is done. And, I mean, you've got Hulk in his underwear on a table with a cast on his foot in this giant metal crutch.
Yes.
That one cracks me up. But and then Lockheed, who's been missing since issue 1, is back with another dragon because he had to get some.
Because you have to have 2.
Right. And then Captain America got his shield put back together. And how'd that happen? I'm on the page, but that would mean reading.
Unless it's by full, or was it strong will, or
unless by force of will or sheer desire.
So basically, all's well and ends well. That with the the Avengers go home, the X-Men went home, then everybody else goes home except for
Ben Grimm. But before we get to that, we got to say how he went home, because Reed Richards basically created a teleportation device, and when he teleports the X-Men back, the other dragon zoomed in there, and there was some weird anomaly while it happened. Which if you go back and read X-Men comics, you'll find out what it is. We're not going to tell you what it is. We don't. That's
right.
not about. But then he's able to teleport the Avengers back, and then they have a discussion with Ben Grimm.
Yes. And Ben sticks around, and he closes with an FDR quote, "Nothing to fear, but fear as hell."
Well, and what's really, really cool about this is at this point, the Thing came out with his own comic book, which was what happened to him after Secret Wars on this planet and all these other planets and stuff like that. It is a really good series. It's basically a I'm going to find myself series. So
nice.
I recommend it. Check it out. It's really good. It evolves the character of the Thing instead, not just the brainless, rocky, giant, muscled dude.
Right. Yeah. I vaguely remember the comic when it came out, but I don't remember. I didn't read it. So.
Right. But the hard thing about this decision he made, so he made this decision to stay because on this planet he can transform back to human form. But I don't think they brought it up at the end of the comic book, but he has a girlfriend on Earth named Alicia.
Yes.
She's blind. He mentions her earlier in the series. I miss Alicia. I may never see her again. But yet, at the end, chooses to stay.
Which is powerful.
Right. Because then, if you follow the comic books, eventually the Human Torch gets Alicia. Because he's just a fucking wild human being.
Johnny likes to sing Michael Jackson tunes to the ladies.
Right. Yeah. But, I mean, yeah, and, at one point, Saji is hurt, and Johnny's supposed to care for her, and Colossus is like, hey, Saji's hurt. His response is, I don't have time for a chippy right now, because he's worried about Reed. I'm like, you piece of fucking shit. You're a racist. You're a misogynist. What else are you?
You're filth.
Yeah. So that series made me like the Human Torch even less than I already did, because I didn't ever really care for the Human Torch. Fantastic Four, they were at the time more of a science-driven comic book, and it got kind of boring at times to me.
I was never really a huge fan of the series.
Right.
Or the characters.
But it got more interesting after Secret Wars, because since Ben Grimm decided to stay, that's when She-Hulk joins the Fantastic Four to take his place.
Right. Yeah.
And I talked to Jennifer beforehand and said, look, Reed needs some muscle. Will you take my spot? I want to stay here. And she said, sure, why not? I don't want to be a fucking Avenger anymore, because, that's boring. Been there, done that.
This is also an interesting time in Marvel Comics, too, because between the Secret Wars and Secret Wars 2, which is kind of like the Beyonder comes back and he kind of puts them through trials and stuff on Earth. It's not as good.
Yeah. I didn't even. It was so bad that I didn't even read the whole series, because it kept crossing from one comic book to another. It wasn't just its own miniseries like this was. It was jumping from here to here to here.
It was a ploy to get you to read every every thread that was going out at the time, because the continuation, it would be in Fantastic Four, and then it would continue in Amazing Spider-Man, and then would come back to Thor issue. It's like you had to buy all the comics to get the entire story. Plus, there was their own Secret Wars 2 comic at the time too, which you couldn't just read that. You had to read all the comics at the time to know what the hell was going on.
Right, and back then you didn't have the internet, so to try to find out what comic book you had to buy. A lot of times you would get lucky and it stayed at the back end of the issue, but sometimes it wouldn't, and you're like, where the fuck do I catch the story next?
Yeah, and like
after a while, you just give up on it.
And like where we grew up, in the areas that we grew up, you'd go to the local convenience store and they'd get 2 issues.
Mm-hmm.
They'd get 2 of that comic, and you had to beat all your friends there to get it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a bookstore that there was hundreds of issues of it and everybody got one. Right.
There was one bookstore here in town that I live in. It was called Levi's back then. It was an actual bookstore, but they also had comic books. He had a huge comic book section too. He was the only, quote, comic book shop around. You could buy them at like Kroger's or Rick's and stuff like that, and at supermarkets and shit like that. But like you said, they only had limited issues.
Yeah, we had a 7-Eleven
that
sold comics, and like when I used to collect the Marvel Universe, which was kind of a who's who of all the characters. It was like their backstory, their height, their weight, their strength, weaknesses. But that issue would come out once a month, but I knew when it was coming out, I would have to run that, like basically I would sneak out of school so that on the day that I knew that the comics would come to the 7-Eleven and make it down there, I'd ride my bike on those days, no matter if it was snowing or not, so I could beat my friends to the store so I could buy it.
Right. Yeah, and see, where I lived, I was 2 miles from the closest place that I could buy comic books, and that was, this little party store in Wademan.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of, a lot of my friends read comics, but not but my school was a bunch of different towns. So a lot of my friends weren't in the same town that I was in.
Right. Yeah, the town that I grew up in, everybody lived right there, and a lot of us walked to school and walked home together, and we all read comics and collected comics at the same time. So there was kind of like some give and take, though. It's like people knew that I was collecting those, and then there was other issues. I had a friend that was absolutely in love with the Amazing Spider-Man series, so we kind of didn't touch those, and then they didn't touch the comics that we kind of knew who was, and then we got to read them
right
because everybody bought them. You could go to his house and you could read the thing, but it's not like you said, there was no internet, so you couldn't just watch a YouTube video and within 1 hour have the entire Secret Wars. You couldn't download a podcast and gets 2 idiots' opinions on a 12-issue miniseries that came out in 1984.
Right. And I'm going to give you guys a fun fact. Comic books is one of the 5 original art forms that originated in the United States.
Damn.
And from there, it's traveled across the world, and that's where, like, manga is the Japanese word for comic book, but they stole their style from Disney because they went for a more simplistic style. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I'm going to go into a little comic book history now because why not? And we could probably expand this to another podcast some other point. But at the time of DC and Marvel, if you created a character in either of these companies, you did not own the rights to the character. So, like, the creators of Superman were these 2 Jewish kids. They created Superman, and they worked for DC for a long time, but after they left, they weren't getting royalties from Superman or anything else, not from the movies or anything else, until years later, and the family filed a lawsuit, and DC finally caved and gave them some money.
Yeah.
But that's why you have Image Comics, because people like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, Rob Liefeld, horrible artist, but created Deadpool.
Yeah.
Just don't ask him to draw feet. or women. But him and Todd McFarlane and a couple others, like I believe Jim Lee, went and formed Image, so that way all the artists and all the writers and everybody else kept the rights to the characters they created.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I saw you were going to jump in there. I just had to finish that thought.
No, it's perfect. I was going to say this other thing too. Around this time, there was DC came to Marvel and offered to sell their company to Marvel.
Marvel was smart and didn't buy it.
And Marvel said no. And one of the things I think is still funny is Marvel says your characters aren't developed good enough for our universe. which is still, to me, is funny, because if you look at the characters in both, there's pretty much an equal from both.
Right.
And I mean, DC had Superman, so Marvel had to create the Sentry.
Right.
And there's tons and tons. There's Deadshot, there's Punisher. There's all these different.
Batman, Captain America.
Yeah,
Batman, Moon Knight. Yeah. So I mean, it's funny because Aquaman, Submariner came out before Aquaman did.
Mm-hmm.
So all you fans out there know that.
Yes.
Jason Momoa is an evolved version of Aquaman, because when I was a kid, Aquaman could talk to fish, and that was just all he could fucking do. He was the most useless superhero ever.
He would have been great as that in that reality show where those guys made aquariums.
Right. Basically, he was the hero that if you had to go fight at sea, you would take him with you, so you could get the whales to come help.
The Wonder Twins were more useful.
Right. Wonder Twin powers activate. Form of giant eagle. Form of giant ice dildo.
And we're going to take the eagle and we're going to cram the ice dildo. Why am I always getting crammed into people?
Right. But yeah, so that kind of sums up the Secret Wars for you. Tonight's podcast was brought to you by the letters Marvel.
The letter S and W.
So Disney sponsor us, even though we said bad shit about you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So if you've never seen the comics, the Secret Wars, it's worth it. I lost or sold off my entire comic book collection, minus I kept all of my Secret Wars, I kept all my Camelot 3000, and I kept all the Marvel Universe. Those are the only comics I still have left.
I still have, I have 6 long boxes and a couple of other boxes that are full of comic books.
Nice.
To find these comics so I could read them before the podcast, I went through all 6 of those long boxes, and of course, it wasn't until the last goddamn box. And they weren't all together in the box. I had to search through every fucking comic to get all 12 of them out of there.
Nice.
So in summary, we talked about all 12 issues of the Secret War. We jumped back and forth because it's what we fucking do.
Right.
We have our free flow for them, and that's what we like, and hopefully you like it too.
It wasn't 100% chronological, but go fuck yourself.
Right. So if there's something in the future you would like to hear us talk about, leave us a comment down below, give us a like, a subscribe, what everybody else fucking says on YouTube and shit like that. Do all that stuff for us too, please.
Follow us on Twitter at the Bunny's Hole, and our website, thebunnyrabbitshole.com. Visit those, and I'm just going to say insert tagline here.
Peace. Love you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.